Welcome back, learner. We are so glad you are joining us for today's deep dive. Because today we're starting with a concept that we all kind of take for granted.
Right, a very universal concept.
Yeah, like when you think about a child's bedroom, there is this totally universal expectation of it being a sanctuary.
Yeah.
It's that one place where the door closes, the outside world just kind of fades away, and a kid can just exist.
Exactly. Surrounded by their favorite things. Feeling completely secure.
Yeah.
It is supposed to be a space of absolute autonomy,
Right.
a fortress of solitude in the best possible psychological sense, really. A place where a developing mind can just decompress.
But when you open up the source materials we're plunging into today, well, that bedroom isn't a sanctuary at all. The door isn't closed for privacy. It's locked from the outside.
Yeah, which completely changes the dynamic.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the window doesn't look out onto a world of possibility. It's literally being fitted with heavy iron bars. We're looking at a space that has been violently, methodically transformed from a place of rest into a literal prison cell.
And what makes this transformation truly chilling is how utterly mundane it all looks from the outside.
Oh, absolutely.
We aren't looking at a subterranean dungeon or some high-security facility. It's a perfectly normal, obsessively manicured suburban house on a street called Privet Drive. The abuse is just hiding in plain sight behind garden hedges and washed cars.
Which is terrifying. And that brings us to our mission for you today, learner. We are taking a stack of source materials detailing the beginning of the second year at a certain magical school. Specifically, the first 7 chapters of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
But we are going to look way beyond the magic spells and the flying broomsticks.
Way beyond. We're getting into the heavy stuff.
Right. We will uncover the hidden underlying mechanics operating beneath the surface of this text. Our goal is to explore how isolation is actively weaponized against a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah, and to expose the stark, almost brutal economic and class divides hiding right there within magical society.
We're also going to examine the terrifying autonomy of the enchanted objects these wizards create and break down the incredibly dangerous contrast between manufactured PR-driven fame and actual grounded competence.
Okay, let's unpack this. We begin our journey right where the source material begins, in total suffocating isolation. And this is before a single spark of magic even occurs.
Right. The mundane cruelty comes first.
Exactly. We drop in on Harry Potter on his 12th birthday. The Dursleys, the family he lives with, have completely aggressively ignored the fact that it is his birthday.
Not even a card, just nothing.
Nothing. Instead, their entire household is consumed by rehearsals for a dinner party. Uncle Vernon is hosting a wealthy builder named Mr. Mason and his wife, and Vernon is just desperate to secure a massive order for his drill company.
The psychological control being exerted over Harry in this opening sequence is staggering, really. The Dursleys are isolating him physically and emotionally to maintain their own fragile grip on normalcy.
Because they're terrified of him.
Oh, absolutely terrified. They have locked all of his magical items, his broomstick, his wand, his cauldron, in a cupboard under the stairs. His owl, Hedwig, is padlocked inside her cage. She's unable to fly or hunt or deliver messages.
They're cutting off his communication.
Exactly. The text explicitly notes that Uncle Vernon treats Harry like a bomb that might go off at any moment. Because they are terrified of his abnormality, their solution is total erasure. During the dinner party, Vernon demands that Harry stay in his room, making absolutely no noise, pretending he doesn't exist.
I mean, quote, I'll be in my room, making no noise and pretending I'm not there. Vernon actually makes Harry repeat it like a mantra during their rehearsal.
It's deeply disturbing.
It really is. It is a forced psychological deletion of a child. But then, into this sensory deprivation chamber of a life, drops a creature named Dobby the house elf.
Right on his bed.
Just appears out of thin air to warn him of a plot of mortal danger at Hogwarts. He begs Harry not to return to the magical world. And to enforce this, Dobby reveals something heartbreaking. He has been hoarding Harry's letters from his best friends, Ron and Hermione, all summer.
We see a profoundly twisted parallel here between the Dursleys and Dobby.
Oh, that's a great point. How so?
Well, the Dursleys isolate Harry out of pure malice and a deep-seated fear of what he represents. Dobby, on the other hand, isolates Harry out of a desperate, heavily warped sense of protection.
Because he thinks he's helping.
Right. Dobby understands that Harry's primary motivation to return to school is his emotional connection to his friends. So by intercepting and stealing those letters, Dobby is instituting a total information embargo.
Wow. Yeah, he really is.
He is actively trying to break Harry's spirit, to make him feel completely friendless, abandoned, and forgotten. He's operating under the tragic logic that a depressed, isolated Harry will choose the miserable safety of his muggle prison over the mortal peril waiting for him in the magical world.
It's protective isolation, but the psychological damage is identical. And looking at how Dobby operates shows us how the magical world's absolute enslavement of house elves has completely corrupted their understanding of what it means to care for someone.
Corrupted it entirely.
Dobby's reactions to his own perceived failures are horrifying to read. If he even slightly speaks ill of the dark wizard family he serves, he physically assaults himself.
Right in front of a child, no less.
Yeah, he bangs his head furiously against Harry's bedroom window. He threatens to shut his own ears in the oven door.
Dobby's self-harm serves as a direct physical manifestation of systemic abuse. In this universe, a house elf is magically and legally bound to serve one family forever. Their internal framework for right and wrong, for action and consequence, has been entirely built by centuries of violent punitive measures.
So they literally don't know any other way.
Exactly. When Dobby decides to cross the line and protect Harry Potter, his only conceivable methodology for action is one that involves suffering. He inflicts severe emotional suffering on Harry by taking the letters, and he inflicts severe physical suffering on himself simply for the rebellion of being in Harry's presence. We are forced to question the morality of a so-called enlightened magical society that relies on an entire race of subjugated, self-harming beings to cook their food and clean their massive homes.
It's super dark when you really pull it apart like that. And Dobby's version of quote-unquote help escalates from intercepting mail to actively destroying Harry's immediate environment.
Oh, the pudding.
Yes, the pudding. To force Harry to promise not to go to school, Dobby sprints downstairs and uses magic to levitate Aunt Petunia's masterpiece of a dessert. This massive mountain of whipped cream and sugared violets, he holds it hostage near the ceiling, and when Harry refuses to promise to stay away from Hogwarts, Dobby just drops it.
He just lets it go.
Completely ruining this incredibly high-stakes dinner party. And this one action triggers an absolute avalanche of consequences. In the chaos, an owl swoops into the dining room, terrifying Mrs. Mason, who happens to have a mortal phobia of birds.
The timing is just perfect for maximum destruction.
Seriously. The owl drops a letter from the Ministry of Magic. It's from a woman named Mafalda Hopkirk at the Improper Use of Magic office, issuing a formal warning to Harry for the hover charm that Dobby just cast.
And that letter fundamentally shifts the power dynamic of the entire summer. It exposes a crucial piece of information to the Dursleys, which is that Harry is legally forbidden from using magic outside of school.
Right, because up until then they had no idea.
Up until that precise moment, Harry had been surviving the abuse by utilizing the threat of the unknown. He had been muttering nonsense words like jiggery-pokery and hocus-pocus to terrify his bully of a cousin, Dudley.
Just totally messing with him.
It was a complete bluff, a psychological defense mechanism relying entirely on the Dursleys' ignorance of magical law.
Because the Dursleys fully believed he could turn them into dung beetles at any second. They were keeping their distance out of sheer fear.
The Ministry's letter strips Harry of that invisible armor. The moment Uncle Vernon reads that Harry will be expelled if he casts a spell, the invisible cage of fear that Harry built around himself collapses, and Vernon replaces it with a physical one.
The bars.
The bars. Vernon hires a man to install heavy iron bars on Harry's window. He gets a cat flap to the bedroom door to push cold canned soup through twice a day. Harry is locked in around the clock, allowed out only briefly morning and evening to use the bathroom. The Ministry's intervention, which was designed to regulate magic, actually facilitates child abuse.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, learner, and I have to push back hard on this Ministry tracking system. This so-called trace
Is deeply flawed.
deeply flawed. Mafalda Hopkirk's letter explicitly states they detected a hover charm at Harry's place of residence. But they clearly have no idea who actually cast it, because it was Dobby, not Harry. Doesn't this incredibly flawed system heavily penalize kids like Harry who live with non-magical people? Think about it. If you are a wizarding child living in a house full of adult witches and wizards who are casting spells all the time to cook, clean, travel, how would the Ministry ever know if the kid cast a spell or the parent did?
They wouldn't.
Those kids could be practicing magic all summer with absolute impunity.
You've isolated a massive structural inequality woven directly into the fabric of magical law. The trace mechanism detects the occurrence of magic within the vicinity of an underage wizard. It does not identify the specific biological signature of the caster.
Which is wild.
Therefore, the enforcement of the decree for the restriction of underage wizardry is entirely disproportionate. Children born to muggles, or orphans like Harry living in muggle environments, are subjected to constant, unforgiving surveillance. A single rogue charm acts like a flare gun to the authorities.
Yeah, they get a warning letter within minutes.
Conversely, children living in pure blood or heavily magical households are effectively shielded by the ambient magical activity of their parents. The ministry completely relies on wizarding parents to voluntarily enforce the rule within their own homes, which is a staggering legal loophole.
It really is.
It is an institutional bias that actively targets the most vulnerable demographics of their society while giving the established multi-generational magical families a free pass.
It's essentially a magical surveillance state that only polices the minorities living outside the established magical enclaves. And this structural unfairness isn't just a background detail. It drives the plot forward and leads us directly into the deep structural class divides operating in this world.
Because it forces an intervention.
Exactly. Because Harry's forced literal isolation pushes his friends to take desperate extra-legal measures. His best friend Ron Weasley, along with his older twin brothers Fred and George, show up in the dead of night in a flying turquoise Ford Anglia.
A great visual. So great. They throw a rope around the iron bars on Harry's window, gun the engine, rip the bars clean off the house, and yank Harry and his belongings out of his prison.
The physical destruction of those iron bars provides an immense sense of narrative catharsis. It represents a violent, necessary transition from the sterile, abusive, highly controlled environment of the Dursley household into a world defined by completely different rules. By pulling Harry through that window, the Weasley brothers pull him directly into their family dynamic. And the Weasley family serves as our primary grounded lens for understanding magical economics and class standing.
We arrive with them at their home, the Burrow. And the contrast to Privet Drive is just breathtaking.
It's day and night.
The Burrow looks like it used to be a large stone pig pen, but extra rooms and stories have been haphazardly added on over the years, held up entirely by magic. It is chaotic and alive. There's a ghoul howling in the attic, plumbing. There are gnomes running wild through the garden, tearing up the roots. And there's a clock in the kitchen with no numbers that just has hands pointing to things like time to feed the chickens or you're late. It's bursting with character.
And at the center of it all is Mrs. Weasley, Molly. She is absolutely furious at her sons for stealing the car and flying it across the country, but in the exact same breath, she pivots to being incredibly nurturing to Harry. She's piling sausages and fried eggs onto his plate because she can see he's half-starved.
The Burrow is bursting with life, warmth, and acceptance. However, the source materials are meticulous in establishing the Weasleys' harsh economic reality. They are financially destitute.
Oh yeah, they really struggle.
Later in the text, when they travel to the Wizarding Bank, Gringotts, we get a visceral look inside their family vault. It contains only a small pile of silver sickles and a single gold galleon. Harry is standing right there, and he feels a deep, twisting sense of awkwardness because his own vault is piled high with a small fortune left by his parents.
Which is such a tough moment for a 12-year-old to navigate.
The Weasleys are forced to buy everything secondhand. Their robes, their wands, their spell books. Yet, despite this overwhelming poverty, they take Harry in, feed him, and treat him like a son without a fraction of a second's hesitation. They represent a working-class ethos that values community and care over material accumulation.
We also get to meet Arthur Weasley, the patriarch of the family. He works at the Ministry of Magic in a tiny, overcrowded department called the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office. He is endlessly obsessed with how Muggles manage to survive without magic.
He's fascinated by the mundane.
So fascinated. He comes home exhausted after working through the night on 9 different raids, enthusiastically rambling about biting kettles and shrinking door keys that Muggles end up buying. But the grand irony here is that his own backyard shed is packed to the roof with Muggle items that he takes apart and bewitches himself. The most obvious being the flying Ford Anglia.
Arthur Weasley's behavior highlights a deeply hypocritical element of the magical government. Arthur actually drafted and wrote the very law he is employed to enforce, the Muggle Protection Act. But as his wife furiously points out to him in the kitchen, he intentionally wrote a specific loophole into the legislation.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Right. He drafted the law so that it was perfectly legal to magically enchant a Muggle car as long as the wizard did not intend to actually fly it.
He literally defends himself by saying, I was just tinkering with it to see how it worked.
Exactly, the kind of plausible deniability a lawmaker builds for themselves. This tells us volumes about the integrity of the magical government. Even the characters framed as the good guys, the well-meaning, hardworking civil servants like Arthur, are entirely willing to exploit legal loopholes to pursue their own personal hobbies.
Because it's convenient for them.
Right. The rule of law in the magical world is highly subjective. It sets a dangerous precedent that the rules are malleable, depending heavily on who is writing them and who is enforcing them.
And if we want to see how the other half lives, how the rules bend for the ultra-wealthy, we get that contrast almost immediately. The Weasleys use flue powder to travel by fireplace from the Burrow to Diagon Alley to buy their school supplies.
Which is terrifying for a first-timer.
Yeah, Harry has never used this mode of transportation. He steps into the fire, swallows a mouthful of hot ash, mispronounces his destination as Diagon Alley, and gets violently spat out of the wrong fireplace entirely.
He ends up in a very bad neighborhood.
He lands in a terrifying dust-covered shop called Borgin and Burke's, located in a shady district called Nocturne Alley. He realizes he's in danger, hides inside a large black cabinet, and watches the door open. In walk Draco Malfoy and his father, Lucius.
The introduction of Lucius Malfoy provides the complete, chilling inverse of the Weasley family dynamic. The Malfoys are immensely wealthy, deeply influential, aristocratic, and their interactions are entirely transactional and devoid of warmth.
Complete opposites.
While Arthur Weasley is out conducting exhausting, dangerous night raids to seize dark, enchanted objects that are harming innocent people, Lucius Malfoy is quietly visiting Mr. Borgin to illegally sell off his personal inventory of dark artifacts and deadly poisons, specifically to avoid those very raids.
Lucius literally stands there in this dark shop and complains, quote, "The name Malfoy still commands a certain respect, yet the ministry grows ever more meddlesome. He's feeling the political heat from Arthur Weasley's newly drafted Muggle protection laws, so he's dumping his illegal stash."
Notice the underlying power dynamics at play there. Lucius operates almost entirely above the law through a combination of immense wealth and political intimidation. But even he is forced to adapt to shifts in governmental policy.
You can't just ignore it completely?
No, he has to play the game. He is preemptively liquidating his highly illegal assets to maintain his pristine, untouchable public image in case the ministry actually searches his manor. We also observe his parenting style with Draco during this scene.
Oh, it's brutal.
It is cold, incredibly demanding, and highly critical. He belittles Draco in front of a shopkeeper for being beaten in academic exams by Hermione Granger, whom he derisively points out is Muggle-born. The Malfoy family structure is based entirely on maintaining status, blood purity, and high expectations, which stands in stark, unforgiving contrast to the chaotic, unconditional warmth of the Weasley family.
This simmering tension between these two drastically different families boils over spectacularly just a few chapters later inside Flourish and Blott's, the main wizarding bookstore. They're all there to buy their school books. Gilderoy Lockhart is hosting a massive book signing at the front of the shop, but the real visceral action happens in the back by the cauldrons.
Right away from the cameras.
Yeah. Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy bump into each other. Lucius immediately goes on the offensive. He mocks Arthur's poverty, sneers at his association with Muggle parents because Hermione's parents happen to be standing right there. And then Lucius reaches into young Ginny Weasley's cauldron and pulls out a very old, very battered secondhand copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. Lucius holds it up and sneers that Arthur has sunk so low he is a disgrace to the name of wizard.
And Arthur Weasley, the mild-mannered civil servant, completely snaps.
He loses it.
He throws himself at Lucius Malfoy, and they engage in a violent physical fistfight right in the middle of the crowded bookstore. They're throwing punches, knocking over heavy bookshelves, and brawling until Hagrid has to physically wade in and pull them apart. Lucius, bleeding from the lip, thrusts the battered book back at Ginny, his eyes glittering with a calculated malice, and sweeps out of the shop.
I want you to picture this, learner. The confrontation in the bookstore feels exactly like a billionaire politician bumping into an overworked, underpaid public defender at a local grocery store and just tearing into them physically.
That's a really good analogy.
Lucius is essentially saying, you write and enforce the laws, but your family's in rags, and I'm the one who can afford to effortlessly bypass everything you do. It is pure, unadulterated class warfare out in the open. What does this all mean for the overall stability of their society when the lawmakers and the ultra-wealthy elite are literally brawling in the streets over ideology?
It clearly indicates a society teetering on the brink of a major ideological fracture. In the magical world, the economic divide is intrinsically fatally linked to the politics of blood purity. The Weasleys represent integration, tolerance, and public service, but they are systematically marginalized economically.
Right, they have no power in that sense.
Exactly. The Malfoys represent segregation, the hoarding of dark magic, and aristocratic entitlement, and they hold the vast majority of the financial and political power. When these two opposing forces collide, the polite veneer of civil society instantly shatters.
And it gets dangerous.
Very dangerous. But what's absolutely vital to remember about the scene is the physical mechanics of what Lucius did. He didn't just hand the Transfiguration book back to Ginny. The outline notes that he slipped something else inside it. He used the Weasleys' grinding poverty, their humiliating need to purchase secondhand books, as the perfect, undetectable delivery mechanism for a dark plot. He weaponized their economic status against them, planting a dangerous object on a vulnerable child.
That is incredibly sinister, turning their lack of funds into a physical vulnerability. And speaking of the contrast between everyday magic and dark magic, the source materials highlight this difference brilliantly back at the Burrow with the gnomes.
A denoming.
Yeah, when Mrs. Weasley forces Harry and the boys to denome the garden, it's not some dark, terrifying, ritualistic banishment. They literally go into the bushes, grab these little leathery potato-headed creatures by the ankles, swing them in circles over their heads until the gnomes are dizzy, and chuck them over the hedge into the next field. Harry actually starts enjoying himself. It's an everyday, physical, almost agricultural chore.
The denoming sequence serves as a brilliant illustration of working-class magical life. It is highly physical, a bit messy, undeniably loud, but fundamentally harmless. The gnomes aren't killed, they just wander back a few days later.
And stumble back in.
Contrast that rough, functional magic with what Harry observes in Borgin and Burke's. Shrunken heads, withered hands that provide light only to thieves, cursed opal necklaces that have claimed 19 lives.
Yeah.
The sources meticulously establish a dichotomy between the quirky, life-sustaining magic of the Weasleys and the lethal, highly exploitative magic hoarded by the elite dark arts practitioners.
We have this massive mounting friction. Friction between following the strict rules of the ministry and bending them. Friction between the wealthy and the destitute. And all of this friction completely combusts when Harry and Ron face the ultimate immovable barrier at King's Cross Station.
A literal brick wall.
A literal brick wall. They are trying to get onto platform 9 3/4 to catch the Hogwarts Express. Percy, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, Fred, George, and Ginny all walk confidently right through the solid brick wall between platforms 9 and 10. Harry and Ron are the last to go. They push their heavy carts, run at the barrier, and crash. They slam into solid brick and metal. Their trunks fly everywhere. The magical gateway has inexplicably sealed itself.
They are completely stranded in the Muggle world, and what we witness in the subsequent minutes is a masterclass in the deeply flawed, panic-driven cognitive processes of 12-year-old boys.
It is stunning to read, because Ron's immediate thought process is not, let's wait right here by the car for my highly capable adult magical parents to come back through the barrier and help us. His thought process immediately jumps to, we're going to miss the train. Wait, the car parked outside flies. Let's steal it and fly it all the way to Scotland ourselves.
We are seeing the severe limitations of an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. Their brains are simply not equipped to accurately assess risk or consider long-term consequences in a high-stress situation. You have to contextualize Harry's mental state here, too. He just spent the entire summer locked in a room, starved and isolated.
The trauma response is kicking in.
Precisely. The mere concept of missing the train and losing his return to Hogwarts, his only true home and source of safety, induces a state of absolute blinding panic. His fight-or-flight response is taken over. And Ron, desperate to be the hero and solve the catastrophic problem, applies a child's wildly inaccurate interpretation of the law. He convinces Harry and himself that because missing the train constitutes an emergency, the strict laws against underage magic and exposing the magical world are temporarily suspended.
Which is just hilarious kid logic. So they throw their trunks into the trunk, hit the silver button for the invisibility booster, lift off into the sky over London, and almost immediately the booster completely fails.
Of course it does.
It flickers and dies, leaving a flying turquoise car completely visible to the Muggle world below. They are forced to fly above the cloud line, dodging airplanes trying to follow the tracks of the Hogwarts Express. The journey is agonizing. It's freezing cold, they have no water, and they survive on a single pack of toffees.
Not exactly a glamorous road trip.
No, not at all. And just as the sun sets and they finally reach the silhouette of the castle, the overworked engine whines and dies. They plummet out of the sky and crash violently directly into the canopy of a massive ancient tree sitting on the school grounds, the Whomping Willow.
This crash initiates one of the most fascinating thematic elements of the text, which is the rebellion of manufactured objects.
Oh, this is so good. Let's dig into this.
The Whomping Willow is not a passive piece of magical flora. It is a violent, highly reactive entity. It actively attacks the car, pounding the roof and doors with branches as thick as battering rams, shattering the glass. But the truly remarkable element in this scene is the car itself.
Right, because it reacts.
Mr. Weasley's endless illegal tinkering has inadvertently given this muggle machine something akin to sentience.
The car doesn't just magically restart. It actively works to save them. It throws itself into reverse and peels out of the tree's reach. But once they are safe on the grass, the car decides it has had absolutely enough of this abuse.
It's done.
It pops its doors open, violently ejects Harry, Ron, their heavy trunks, and Hedwig's owl cage onto the ground, and then goes completely feral. It literally revs its engine and rumbles off into the darkness of the Forbidden Forest, its taillights blazing angrily. It behaves exactly like an exhausted, abused beast of burden saying, "I quit. I am no longer your servant."
The car developing a personality, rescuing itself, and abandoning its drivers is a profound commentary on the nature of the objects wizards create. Magic in this universe is not a perfectly sterile science, nor is it completely under the wizard's permanent control.
It's unpredictable.
Highly unpredictable. When you forcefully imbue an inanimate muggle object with intense magical energy, you risk imbuing it with autonomy. The car, pushed leagues past its mechanical and magical limits during the flight, asserts its independence. It decisively rejects its creators and their demands.
The car isn't the only magical tool that breaks down under pressure during this sequence. During the violent thrashing from the tree, Ron's wand snaps almost completely in two. The tip is just dangling by a few thin wooden splinters.
We cannot overstate what a catastrophic loss this is for a wizard, especially one from a destitute family.
Right, because he can't just go buy another one.
He absolutely cannot. A wand is a wizard's primary conduit to the world. Magic is an intense internal energy that requires an incredibly precise external focus to be channeled safely and effectively. Trying to push raw magical energy through a broken, splintered conduit is akin to trying to pump high-pressure water through a severely shattered pipe.
It's going to burst.
Exactly. It doesn't just fail to work, it becomes actively, physically dangerous to the user and anyone nearby. Ron is now functionally disabled in the magical educational system, and he's acutely aware that his family cannot afford to purchase a replacement.
So Harry and Ron drag their heavy trunks up the stone steps to the castle doors, feeling totally defeated, and they are immediately caught in the shadows by Professor Severus Snape.
And he is loving every second of it.
Oh, Snape is absolutely thrilled by their misfortune. He drags them down to his dungeon office and holds up the Evening Prophet newspaper. The headline screams, "Flying Ford Anglia mystifies Muggles." 6 or 7 Muggles in London and the countryside spotted them. Snape looks at them with venomous joy and wants to expel them on the spot.
Snape's argument here is rooted in strict legalism. He points out, quite accurately, that they have blatantly flouted the decree for the restriction of underage wizardry and caused severe damage to a valuable ancient specimen of magical flora. More importantly, he argues that they have risked exposing the entire magical world to the Muggle populace, which is a crime of massive proportions.
Professor McGonagall, their head of house, and Headmaster Dumbledore finally arrive in the dungeon. Dumbledore is grave, his eyes aren't twinkling, but he doesn't expel them. McGonagall gives them a detention and writes a letter to their families. And I have to pause and push back on the school's response here.
Let's hear it.
Is Dumbledore showing massive, undeniable favoritism to Harry? They exposed the magical world to Muggles. They stole a vehicle. Does Dumbledore genuinely believe a mere detention fits the severity of the crime? Because as much as Snape is a cruel, vindictive teacher, he actually seemed to have a completely solid legal point regarding the statute of secrecy.
It is a highly perceptive pushback. If we strictly apply the letter of the law, Snape is entirely correct. Their actions constituted a severe, potentially catastrophic breach of the international statute of secrecy. However, Dumbledore operates on a completely different axis of justice than Snape or the Ministry.
How do you mean?
Dumbledore evaluates intent, context, and psychological well-being. He looks at Harry and Ron and sees 2 traumatized 12-year-old boys who panicked, who didn't act out of malice, rebellion, or a desire to expose the magical world, but out of a desperate primal need to get to their school. Furthermore, Dumbledore is profoundly aware of Harry's home life.
Oh, right, because Dumbledore placed him there.
Exactly. Expelling Harry would mean sending him back to the Dursleys permanently. A sentence Dumbledore knows is tantamount to condemning him to systemic abuse. Dumbledore consciously chooses restorative justice and leniency over punitive justice, heavily relying on his own immense institutional authority to bypass the strict mandates of magical law.
So we are right back to that highly subjective rule of law we saw with Arthur Weasley. If you're on the right side of the people in power, if Dumbledore likes you, the rules bend to accommodate you.
It's a recurring theme, yes.
But even if Dumbledore saves them from expulsion, there are still massive social consequences. The very next morning at breakfast in the Great Hall, the mail arrives, and Ron's exhausted family owl, Errol, drops a smoking red envelope directly onto Ron's plate. A howler.
The howler represents the ultimate form of public shaming in magical society.
Ron opens it, and Mrs. Weasley's voice, magically magnified to a deafening, echoing roar, completely fills the Great Hall. Everyone stops eating to stare. She is screaming about the theft of the car, about the deep shame they've brought on the family, and most importantly, she reveals to the entire school that Arthur Weasley is facing a formal inquiry at work at the Ministry because of the enchanted car.
Which is just devastating for Ron.
He is utterly humiliated, literally sinking in his chair to hide under the table. Harry and Ron survive the physical journey of the flying car, but now they are plunged directly into the classroom, where they must face a totally different kind of existential threat. They face the extreme danger of gross incompetence successfully disguised as expertise.
The text brilliantly presents us with two drastically different models of teaching, authority, and interaction with the natural world in rapid succession. Professor Sprout and Professor Gilderoy Lockhart.
Let's examine Professor Sprout first. They head out to the greenhouses for herbology. Professor Sprout is described as a squat little witch wearing a patched hat, and her robes are absolutely covered in damp earth. She is earthy, deeply grounded, and highly competent. She is teaching the second years how to safely repot mandrakes.
Sprout represents true, hard-won expertise. She does not sugarcoat or romanticize the danger of the natural world. She clearly, firmly explains that the cry of an adult mandrake is instantly fatal to anyone who hears it.
Literally fatal.
Yes, because the plants they are working with are only seedlings, she notes their cry will merely knock a person unconscious for several hours. Crucially, she ensures every single student has a pair of thick earmuffs securely in place before she allows anyone to even touch a pot.
She takes safety seriously.
She possesses a deep, abiding respect for the lethal nature of the magical flora she tends, and she meticulously prepares her students to handle that danger safely. Later in the same scene, she casually slaps away the biting, spiky vines of a venomous tentacula plant. She is in complete, unquestioned control of her environment.
Contrast that grounded reality with Gilderoy Lockhart. He floats into the greenhouse wearing immaculate, unstained turquoise robes. He actually stops Professor Sprout before her class begins to give her unsolicited advice on how to properly doctor the Whomping Willow, bragging loudly that he's met exotic plants on his extensive travels. He treats the Hogwarts greenhouse not as a place of learning, but exactly like a press junket.
Lockhart is the ultimate embodiment of superficiality. He is entirely focused on optics, on maintaining his carefully curated brand rather than providing any substance.
He's all flash.
His interaction with Sprout is a classic, infuriating display of arrogant mansplaining. He assumes that his widespread celebrity status automatically equates to practical, functional knowledge, an assumption that Sprout clearly, silently resents as she glares at him.
Then we finally get to his actual classroom, Defense Against the Dark Arts. Arguably the most important subject, the one explicitly designed to teach children how to survive a world filled with dark magic and evil creatures. What does Lockhart do on his first day? He hands out a 54-question quiz.
And it has nothing to do with magic.
Nothing. The questions aren't about defensive spells, shield charms, or counter curses. They are entirely exclusively about his own published autobiography. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? What is his secret ambition? He genuinely penalizes 12-year-olds for not knowing that his ideal birthday gift is harmony between all magic and non-magic peoples, or failing that, a large bottle of Ogden's Old Fire whiskey.
The sheer narcissism on display is breathtaking, but it rapidly transitions from purely comical to actively, physically dangerous when he decides to abandon the quiz and give the students some hands-on experience with what he calls foul creatures.
He brings out a large, cloth-covered cage. He builds the tension dramatically, warning them not to scream, acting like he has captured some terrifying lethal beast. He whips off the cover with a flourish to reveal freshly caught Cornish pixies.
Which are, quite frankly, just pests.
Yeah, they are electric blue, 8-inch high, shrill little creatures darting around the cage. Seamus Finnegan actually snorts with laughter, openly pointing out they aren't exactly dangerous. Lockhart gets immediately defensive, unlatches the cage door, and it is absolute destructive pandemonium.
The pixies aren't lethal in the way a dragon or an adult mandrake is lethal, but they are pure, unfiltered agers of chaos. They swarm the classroom, ripping up heavy textbooks, throwing ink bottles out the windows, and they literally grab a student, Neville Longbottom, by his ears, lift him into the air, and hang him from the heavy ceiling chandelier.
And what does the great, heroic Gilderoy Lockhart do? He rolls up his sleeves, shouts a completely fake-sounding rhyming spell, Pescapixie Pestronomi, which has absolutely zero effect.
Because it's nonsense.
Complete nonsense. A pixie swoops down, steals his wand, and tosses it out the open window. Lockhart utterly panics, dives under his heavy wooden desk for cover, and when the bell rings, he sprints out of the room. He leaves 3 12-year-olds, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, to clean up his massive mess and get Neville down from the ceiling.
This sequence perfectly, ruthlessly exposes him as a complete and utter fraud. He possesses no practical magical ability, not even enough basic competence to cast a simple freezing charm to subdue minor pests.
It's actually pathetic.
It is. He has manufactured an elaborate illusion of competence entirely through ghostwriting books, stealing the achievements of braver witches and wizards, and flashing a perfect smile. And this revelation raises a deeply troubling question for the reader. Why on earth would Headmaster Dumbledore hire a man so obviously, demonstrably unqualified to teach the most vital defensive subject at a school full of children?
Right. I mean, Dumbledore is widely considered to be the greatest wizard alive. He can read minds, he can see through people's lives. How does a grifter like Lockhart actually get the job?
We have to extrapolate and look at the broader systemic failures of Hogwarts as an institution here. It is a widely circulated rumor in the magical world that the Defense Against the Dark Arts teaching post is actively cursed. No teacher has lasted more than a single academic year for decades.
So no one wants the job.
Exactly. It is highly probable, almost certain, that Dumbledore simply had no other applicants for the job. The school is forced to accept a celebrity fraud because the institutional risk and historical mortality rate associated with the position are far too high for any genuinely competent witch or wizard to accept. It highlights a massive vulnerability in the educational system. They are scraping the bottom of the barrel just to fill a desk.
Lockhart is essentially the magical equivalent of the ultimate internet grifter. Yeah. He's that guy online aggressively selling a $5,000 masterclass on how to get rich, but his only actual source of income is selling the masterclass itself to gullible people.
A perfect parallel.
He has no underlying business, no real-world skills. Hermione is the only student who gets full marks on his narcissism quiz because she deeply respects the authority of published textbooks. But you really have to wonder what it says about the broader wizarding public that they buy into his books so eagerly. They are literally putting their children's lives in his hands because he has good teeth and a good PR campaign.
It speaks volumes. A society that consistently values the performance of competence over the actual evidence of competence is inherently fragile and easily manipulated. And Lockhart's obsessive pursuit of fame forces us to closely examine the person in the room who actually possesses true historical fame but desperately wishes he didn't. Harry Potter.
That brings us perfectly into the final section of our sources today, learner, exploring the heavy burden of unwanted fame, and we get the perfect vehicle for this exploration in the character of Colin Creevey. Colin is an excitable first-year Muggle-born student, and from the moment he arrives, he is absolutely obsessed with Harry.
A super fan.
Totally. He follows him down the hallways, constantly taking blinding flash pictures with an old Muggle camera, explaining he wants to send the photos to his milkman father back home, and he begs Harry to sign them.
Colin's awe is completely innocent. It lacks malice. However, it is deeply objectifying. Colin doesn't see Harry as a traumatized 12-year-old boy trying to navigate middle school. He sees him as a superhero, a living cultural artifact.
Like a mascot.
Yes. Colin is enthusiastically projecting his own massive excitement about discovering the magical world onto Harry, treating him less like a peer and much more like a tourist attraction.
And of course, Draco Malfoy sees this incredibly awkward interaction happening in the crowded school courtyard and immediately weaponizes it. Malfoy loudly mocks Harry, shouting to the surrounding crowd that Harry Potter is handing out signed photos actively accusing him of being arrogant and desperate for attention.
And this precise moment of conflict brings out Gilderoy Lockhart, who happens to be passing by and completely disastrously misreads the entire situation. Lockhart hears the phrase "signed photos," aggressively wraps his arm around Harry, pins him to his side, and forces Harry to take a picture with Colin. And then, once the crowd disperses, Lockhart has the sheer audacity to pull Harry aside into a corridor and lecture him on not getting big-headed.
I can't even handle it.
He tells Harry that handing out photos at this early stage of his career makes him look arrogant. He tells Harry he needs to pace his fame, openly stating that surviving a dark wizard isn't quite as impressive as winning a Most Charming Smile award.
The secondhand embarrassment while reading that scene is completely off the charts. It is pure cringe. Lockhart is completely ignoring Harry's deep, obvious physical discomfort and the actual severe trauma attached to his fame. Malfoy was maliciously mocking the lightning scar on Harry's forehead, the literal scar he received when his parents were murdered in front of him. And Lockhart treats that horrific history like it's just a stepping stone in a carefully managed PR campaign.
If we step back and break down the sociology of this courtyard scene, we are essentially witnessing three very distinct, conflicting types of status interacting.
Okay, lay it out for us.
First, you have Harry's inherited, deeply traumatic fame. He didn't earn it through effort, he survived a tragedy to get it, and it profoundly isolates him from his peers. Second, you have Lockhart's actively manufactured parasitic fame. He maintains his status by leeching off the spotlight of others, forcing associations with anyone currently in the news, like Harry. And third, you have Malfoy's generational aristocratic entitlement. Malfoy vehemently resents Harry's fame because it publicly eclipses his own inherited wealth and assumed blood superiority.
The psychological pressure being placed on Harry is insane. Think about it. He is 12 years old. He literally just spent a month locked in a bedroom being starved by his aunt and uncle. Now he's at school, the one place he feels safe, and the adults and peers around him are constantly projecting their own selfish agendas onto him.
Everyone wants a piece of him.
Yeah. Lockhart looks at Harry and sees a useful protege to boost his own public profile. Colin Creevey looks at him and sees a mythical hero. Malfoy looks at him and sees a political rival that must be publicly crushed. Even Oliver Wood, the Gryffindor Quidditch captain, wakes Harry at the crack of dawn for a grueling practice because he sees Harry merely as a utilitarian tool required to win a sports trophy. Harry is rarely, if ever, allowed to just exist as a child.
He functions as a blank vessel for societal expectations, and the outline cuts off the source material at a very specific, highly charged, pivotal moment. Harry, exhausted, arrives at the Quidditch pitch in the misty dawn for practice, only to find Draco Malfoy standing there on the grass, wearing brand-new Slytherin Quidditch robes, holding a top-of-the-line broomstick.
Yes. We leave the story right as Harry stares at Malfoy across the playing field. Knowing Malfoy's character and knowing the depths of his father's deep pockets that we saw earlier in Borgin and Burke's in the bookstore brawl, it perfectly connects all the complex dots of class, wealth, and rivalry we've discussed today. The central conflict of the story is shifting gears.
Moving from the abstract to the literal.
Exactly. It moved from the dark, illegal alleys into the public bookstore, into the chaotic classroom, and now is stepping directly onto the physical playing field. It's rapidly escalating from ideological sneers to direct physical competition.
It perfectly synthesizes our core themes. We can safely extrapolate that Malfoy hasn't earned that spot on the team through raw talent in the way Harry was drafted his first year. It is almost certain his father's immense wealth facilitated it, likely through equipping the entire team with expensive new gear, buying the exact kind of influence that Arthur Weasley point-blank refuses to wield. It is the deep economic divide made visibly manifest in a school sport.
So synthesizing this entire journey, we started out thinking we were looking at a whimsical, fun story about magic spells, flying cars, and magical schools. But truly, this text operates as a masterclass in examining the deep, lasting psychological wounds of isolation. It's a sharp critique of class resentment and how the wealthy effortlessly bypass the laws they expect the poor to rigidly follow. It's a fascinating warning about the rebellion of the objects and technologies we create when we push them to the breaking point. And it is a glaring spotlight on the stark, dangerous difference between holding a prestigious title like Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher and actually possessing the competence required to keep people safe.
And that profound lack of competence leaves us with a final, rather unsettling thread to pull. Look closely at the actions of the adults across all these sources we've discussed. Uncle Vernon is locking a vulnerable child in a room with iron bars, Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy are having a physical fistfight in a public bookstore, destroying property over a political grievance. Dumbledore and McGonagall are completely missing the fact that their new defense teacher is a total fraud. Lockhart is literally fleeing from a cage full of tiny pixies, abandoning his 12-year-old students to physical danger.
It's a terrible track record for the adults.
It really is. We are heavily conditioned to think of Hogwarts as a safe haven, an ultimate sanctuary. But looking closely at the mechanics of these chapters, we are forced to ask a difficult question. Is the magical world actually relying on children to save themselves because the adults are too blinded by vanity, strict rules, and deep-seated prejudice to do it?
It really makes you fundamentally rethink who is actually in charge of this society and whether the systems in place are designed to protect children or just protect the status quo. Thank you, learner, for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep looking closely at the text you read, keep questioning the systems operating beneath the surface, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous cages are the ones brilliantly disguised as a sanctuary. See you next time.